But we begin with our big story, a government shutdown seeming all but inevitable after a last-ditch spending proposal collapsed on the Hill today. Lawmakers scrambling to try to reach an agreement by midnight tomorrow, but still no deal in sight. Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman from Michigan, Haley Stevens. Congresswoman, I'm curious, given where we stand right now, it feels like a shutdown is all but inevitable. Do you feel the same way?
Certainly feels that way, and it is gravely disappointing. In fact, I've heard Republican colleagues for several days now just openly talking about the inevitable shutdown, and it really doesn't need to be this way. And frankly, it's the definition of idiocy. We've seen over the last 10 years with Republican majorities, government shutdowns occur and nothing good coming as a result. In fact, this is just inflicting pain on innocent American people who are going to rely on the government's functionality. We had the Secretary of Transportation today talking about concerns with the FAA, slowdowns with training programs. We saw a stopgap funding measure fail on the House floor just a handful of hours ago. And it's laughable because it's Republicans blocking Republican legislation from going forward. We're in shared government. We've got to start acting like it, and we've got to start delivering for the American people.
Yeah, well, Speaker McCarthy is under attack from his own right flank. His majority is very slim, just a few seats. Why can't you and other Democrats convince him to work with you to reach a bipartisan compromise?
Well, look, we did that earlier this year around the debt ceiling. We weren't supposed to be in this place. We'd agreed to spending limits. We had agreed to a process as it came down to this deadline that we wouldn't be in this place. And all of a sudden, the extremists are now running the show. You're absolutely right that there's extraordinary infighting. And I'm not really sure who's going to win here. Speaker McCarthy is under attack. We've seen that play out over the last month. Those in his own conference are saying that he broke trust. We as Democrats who cut a deal with him around the debt ceiling are feeling that way. But more so, I don't want to continue to break the trust of the American people. This is the core functionality of Congress. I entered into Congress in 2019 in the middle of a partial shutdown. I saw what pain that inflicted. It costs our government money. It costs our country money. And here we are right on the brink. How do we get out of this? What does this look like at the end of the year? What does this look like into the first quarter of next year? What do the stock markets look like come Monday?
Yeah. Well, and now I want to pivot a bit because in your home state, auto workers, front of mind, we've got this historic industry strike now expanding again. You are supporting the men and women on the picket line. They want a 40% wage increase. They also want the conversion of many of those part-time workers to full-time. Some big demands here, but still not enough movement here. But do you think there's room for compromise on both sides?
Well, I'm not in the negotiating room, but what I will say with this strike is that it has been an absolutely remarkable occurrence to see the voice of the worker elevated on our national news, on Good Morning America, spending time on the picket lines, connecting with these men and women, sometimes even retirees as well, and hearing their stories firsthand. I had a multi-decade GM UAW employee say that they couldn't even afford the Silverado truck that they helped to produce. That's a wake-up call. And as someone who served in the Obama administration, I worked on the U.S. auto rescue. I'm fully aware of the concessions that the UAW made at that time. All stakeholders made concessions. And when I got to Congress, what we saw was the automakers selling vehicles at a rate that we couldn't even imagine from that Great Recession period. There's been a tremendous rebounding. There has been incredible innovation. This is the moonshot of the 21st century with the clean energy transition, what we're working on in terms of safety standards with autonomous technology. These are innovations that took place during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our automakers didn't stop. Our auto workers didn't stop. But now we've got to deal our workers in. As a lawmaker, I can stand by our UAW workers as I'm doing, but my goodness gracious, they're in that deal room. We've got to come out to the other side of this. I can't wait to see that contract they signed, because it is going to be a standard for auto workers, not only across this country, but across the world.
Well, what's interesting about that is this is one of those issues where you see bipartisan support for the auto workers on both sides here. But also, I mean, keeping the focus here on Michigan, it's no secret that it's going to play a huge role in the 2024 election. And a recent ABC News poll shows that President Biden is trailing Donald Trump by nearly 10 percentage points in a potential 2024 rematch. Well, both were in your home state this past week. I'm curious, from your vantage point, what are maybe the two top issues that will determine, which way this state goes in 24?
Well, Joe Biden was in Michigan doing what President Joe Biden does best, listening to workers and real UAW employees. He was with the president of the UAW, Mr. Shawn Fain, because he was invited by Shawn Fain to go visit that picket line. And there is no one who knows the U.S. auto industry, the Michigan auto industry, and the Michigan auto worker like Joe Biden does. I joke around with him that we're going to have to get him, a little apartment in Detroit because of his love for the American auto industry. And you bet your bottom dollar that the economy, good jobs are what are going to be on people's minds. There's certainly lots of jobs available, but what we know that the American people, what the Michigan worker is looking for is that good paying job. Housing prices are high right now. Interest rates are at a uniquely high level. Can I afford to buy that home? That is something I am hearing on that picket line right now. The other issue that I think is going to ring very true heading into this election is this notion of good governance, trustworthy governance. Certainly, we pay attention to polls, but as it pertains to these national elections for president, the polling hasn't always been right. We have record voter turnout in Michigan election after election. I am regularly engaging Democrats across Oakland County. They are so mobilized. We have hundreds of people showing up to summer picnics, knocking on doors, paying attention to the candidates who I'm working with for this November's election in places like Madison Heights and Royal Oak that, will have local elections. We want to see our Democrats win in November of 23 so that as we head into 24, the economy and trustworthy governance is front and center.
Democratic Representative Haley Stevens of Michigan, thank you very much for your time. All right, I want to bring in our big story panel here. Joining me is ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse, ABC political contributor and former Democratic Senator from North Dakota Heidi Heitkamp, ABC News contributor, former assistant U.S. attorney, and former chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, John Katko, and contributing political correspondent Rachel Bade. Thank you all. But Heidi, I want to start with you on this. Heard a lot from Representative Stevens there, but right now, Senate leaders have been trying to take the steering wheel from Speaker McCarthy, but they keep hitting these roadblocks. Are there any options left to avoid a shutdown?
It doesn't look like it. And I think McCarthy, we've all been thinking his margin is 3 or 4, 5 members. He lost by 20 today. And that tells you that I think the former president is playing a role in this, but I also think we are a long way from a compromise. And so if he can't move even his own bill, his own CR through the House, I don't know how you could imagine that we're going to get to this weekend without a shutdown of government, which is really tragic.
Well, and John, I want you to hop in here because McCarthy says that he's going to keep on pressing, but what's the end game here? I mean, is there room for some of the hardliners in his party to budge?
The hardliners are a small group that have an outsized influence because of the small majority that Republicans have in the House. And so they tend to take extreme positions like they always do, but now they have real consequences. And I don't think there's a way to satisfy them. They don't know how to get to yes. They only know how to be obstructionists, and this is their ultimate obstructionist move. And they're all going to go raise money on it, and beat their chest and tell them this. But in the end, I don't know how they can stop this from happening. And quite frankly, now going forward, how do you turn the lights back on once they go up? What's going to get them to change their mind? And ultimately, it's probably going to have to be a Democratic and Republican mix to get through this. But my last thought is this: when is the last time the proponents of a shutdown got what they want by shutting down the government? It doesn't happen. It never has happened. It never will. It just doesn't work. So this is a fool's errand, and American people and American workers are caught in the crosshairs.
Well, Rachel, I mean, you spend a ton of time on Capitol Hill. I mean, what are you hearing from lawmakers behind closed doors right now?
I mean, look, everybody's, they're ready for it, and it's coming, and there's not a lot of hope that we can avert, a shutdown at this point. I will say it's clear up here on Capitol Hill that lawmakers are sort of employing this throw spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks strategy here in the House. It was really embarrassing for McCarthy to lose more than 20 House Republicans on his own House GOP bill. And what that tells us is something we already know, that this averting a shutdown, reopening the government, it's going to have to be a bipartisan solution. And yet right now, as we speak, a couple floors below me here in the Capitol, Kevin McCarthy is meeting with House Republicans again. There's no bipartisan talks taking place right now. And he's laying out a path to continue passing Republican bills, which is not going to help anything. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, there's a group of some Senate Republicans who are working with independent Senator Kirsten Sinema to try to add some sort of border money to this stopgap measure to keep the government open. Their hope there was to sort of give the House something that they can latch onto and actually get it through the chamber. But McCarthy says what they're working on, number one, is not enough. And then Senate Democrats are saying that that's a non-starter, that when you talk about the border, you have to talk about immigration. And, immigration has always been sort of the third rail up here. It's really hard for lawmakers to do anything on that topic at any point, let alone do it in the next 48 hours. So not good signs.
Well, and it also seems like there's some Republicans that are okay with the idea of the government shutting down, at least for a period of time. Mike, I want you to hop in here. Millions of workers are going to be affected here. This is ultimately why this matters. But so are some of the social services. Can you break down, I mean, what are we looking at here, the ramifications?
I mean, you just mentioned it in terms of some of the social services, but in particular, it's something that we can all have, that we can feel the impact on is when we start traveling to the airports, which so many Americans do on a daily basis. TSA will be impacted. They will still show up for work, but they won't get paid. That is already a thankless job altogether. Air traffic controllers who are responsible for putting us up in the air and landing us safely, they are already overworked and overtaxed. They will have to show up to work without getting a paycheck. But really, Alex, the narrative that I find most stunning that doesn't get enough talked about is the military. There will be 2 million active military reservists who will have to report for duty who will not be getting paid. There's something about using the military as of late as political pawns and strategies, the way that we've never seen it done before, all the way from the attacks on General Milley, all the way from reproductive rights, but all the way to recently with the military spending bill that the House tried to send over to the Senate that will be done on arrival by reducing the first black Secretary of Defense to a salary of $1, all for political gamesmanship. This is about to be a larger narrative on the Republicans using the military, which has always been a stalwart of their ideology, for political gamesmanship. This is not going to end well for the Republican Party and using the military, which is so good at serving our American freedoms.
I always appreciate that perspective. Mike Muse, Heidi Heidkamp, John Katko, Rachel Bade, my thanks to you all.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.